Move to receive the report.
Is there a second? Okay, all in favor? Aye. Oppose? Report is received. Thank you very much for excellent work. We're now ready to go to item number 6, which comes to us from Planning and Development. Madam Clerk?
Madam Chair, members of the board, item number 6 is a hearing to request consideration of the recommendations of the County Planning Commission and the Montecito Planning Commission to repeal Articles 1 through 5 of Chapter 35 of the County Code and adopt Section 35.1 and 35.2 as specified.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. Mr. Baker?
Madam Chair, members of the board, this is the ZORP, as it's called. The reformatting process started in the year 2003, and as was stated by the clerk, it's essentially to combine essentially all the zoning ordinances and zoning rules that we have into 2 documents, and that's the County Planning and Development document and then the Montecito Planning and Community Development document. It's going to be presented by Kimberly McCarthy, and she will take this and we'll make this very brief. I would note that it was unanimously approved by both the commissions meeting in joint session when it was presented to them last month. So with that, I'll turn it over to Kimberly.
Madam Chair, members of the board, the item before you is the zoning ordinance reformatting project. And can I get the lights dimmed?
Did this presentation come to me email or?
No, it did not. There is a hard copy of the presentation.
Okay.
And it's only 7 slides long.
Get it up on the screen.
What's going on here? There we go. Sorry about that. This project began in December of 2003 as a result of the process improvement efforts. Process improvement teams identified difficulties related to the complexity and structure of the existing zoning ordinances. Based on research done by the Zoning Ordinance Reformatting Project Team, also known as the ZORP team, with input from the consultant and members of the public, a decision was made to combine 5 of the existing zoning ordinances into 2 land use and development codes. Throughout the last 3 years, the ZORP team met several times with your board, the county and Montecito planning commissions, and with the public to provide updates and to gain input and direction on the work efforts. Additionally, an extensive mailing list was created to involve members of the public in the development of the reformatted ordinance documents. The public drafts of the County and Montecito Land Use Development Code were posted on the department's website, and a 3-month period was provided to the public so that they could comment, identify errors, and make suggestions as to improvements to the documents. The corrected and revised versions of the public drafts were also posted online so that changes could be reviewed and tracked. The combination of the zoning ordinances into 2 documents was proposed to accomplish several goals. In general, to make the document easier to read and use, to eliminate unintended inconsistencies while keeping those intentional differences that were unique to a specific area, to modernize and update the language, to ensure compliance with state and federal laws, to update the definitions and to standardize them between the different areas where appropriate, and to provide graphics that made it easier to use the documents. The final result is 2 development code documents, the County Land Use and Development Code, which regulates all of the unincorporated area of the county, excluding the inland area of the Montecito Community Plan area, which is governed by the 2nd document, the Montecito Land Use and Development Code. In the near future, staff in partnership with the Montecito Association will begin incorporating the coastal regulations into the Montecito Community, for the Montecito Community, into the Montecito Land Use and Development Code. These documents contain the regulations of the sign ordinance, which is currently Article 1, the coastal zoning ordinance, Article 2, the inland zoning ordinance, Article 3, the Montecito zoning ordinance, Article 4, and the addressing and the road naming ordinance, which is Article 5. Due to the reformatting and rewriting of the text to accommodate the new format and to ensure better clarity, the documents look very different than the original ordinance language. However, these documents were written to ensure that the application and the impact of the existing regulations was not altered. Within the public hearing, several corrections or requests for changes were identified to the commissions. The bulk of these issues were addressed through minor revisions to the Development Code text. The Montecito Association raised two concerns regarding potentially substantive changes to the Development Code: the inclusion of procedures for development agreements and the definitions for schools, both professional and business-type schools and educational schools. County Council advised the county and Montecito commissions that the inclusions of these items into the development codes was not substantive, as they were consistent with state law and departmental practice, and those items remain. Attachment F of the board letter contains a complete summary of all the changes discussed within the commission's hearing and found subsequently. The initial work efforts focused on reformatting the county's existing zoning regulation. During the reformatting project, several amendments were identified as desirable but determined to be too substantive to be included in the current focused work effort. Attachment I of the board letter provides a list of the potential amendments that may be undertaken in the future to continue to improve processing efforts. And this list can be added to and will be added to as items come up. For example, updating the sign regulations in their entirety is on the Phase 2 list. As well as updating the county subdivision regulations and incorporating them into the development code for better usability, and to create development standards for mobile home parks within residential zones. These are just some of the issues and some of the items that have come up and are placed on our Phase 2 list.
Madam Chair, is it appropriate to ask questions now?
Sure, go right ahead.
Could you just explain a little bit, Kimberly, the relocation of mobile home parks? Give me an example of what we're talking about.
Madam Chair, Supervisor Rose, at the commission, one of the commissioners expressed concern about mobile home closures and not having provisions for the loss of affordable housing, and recommended that we include, when we're looking at development standards, we include some provisions for what might occur if a mobile home park was closed or changed hands, sold, and they wanted to close off the mobile home park.
I think I need a little bit more. That part I
My
understood.
understanding,
Yeah.
if I might, the relocation is assistance to the people,
Okay.
not relocation of the park itself, and it is contemplated by state law.
Okay, that
Madam
helps.
Chair, that's
Thank
correct.
you.
Sorry about that. Thank you. This basically concludes staff's presentation. We therefore recommend that your board accept the commission's recommendations and follow the recommendations on page 1 of your board agenda letter, thus adopting the development codes for the county and Montecito areas.
Supervisor Rose?
Kimberly, in the staff report, not the PowerPoint, I'm on page 2, number 7, a permit path for museums and residential zones. Could you give me a little more on that?
Madam Chair, Supervisor Rose, we inadvertently left off the conditional use permit requirement or the conditional use permit path in the table for museums, and so that was brought to our attention, and we just included that information in.
Okay.
There was no change, it was just left out.
Thank you.
Madam Chair, members of the board, I just make two emphases. One, no substantive changes have been made in the code. And number two, I want to make sure that it's understood that we have to incorporate in the coastal development items back into the Montecito plan. When we initially started, we were just looking at the county, and we had done the work to incorporate that article into the county plan, but we had not done the work with Montecito, so we will be going back and picking that up. And Montecito Association want to make sure that we brought that to your attention, and we will be doing that.
Thank you, Mr. Baker. You know, this represents a tremendous amount of work. And I think we're all overjoyed that it's completed.
No more so than staff, right?
We still got a lot to go if we're going to do some changes to the regulations that are there.
Every journey starts with one step. Does someone else want to?
Yes.
Yeah, Supervisor Firestone?
You know, I tried to look at this and understand what it is we're doing. When my grandchild asked me tonight what we did today in passing this, what would I say?
Oh, Brooks, you asked the hard question. Council,
What the board has done is they have revised consolidated the language of the zoning ordinance so that it's easier to read and easier to get through without actually changing the substantive provisions of the ordinance. You might be able to get
That
away
would
with
have been a
Fran.
good first sentence.
he's got them all ages.
Or, Madam Chair, you now don't have to refer to 5 to 10 books. You can refer to 1.
Okay. Would someone like to make a motion of some sort?
Move to approve, Madam Chair.
I'll second.
Thank you. Madam Clerk?
Mr. Firestone? Mr. Centeno? Mr. Carbajal? Ms. Rose?
Aye.
Ms. Gray?
Aye, thank you.
Passes 5-0.
We're ready to go to item number 7, which comes from the County Council and the County Executive Office.
Madam Chair?
Yes, ma'am.
I had a couple of calls. There's some people think this is starting at 3 o'clock. I don't know. They were told to? Okay, thank you. Helps me. I
And this
appreciate